Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down some fall camp intel. Obviously, the biggest one is Bryce Underwood is the quarterback at Michigan going forward. Going to be really fun to watch. Very talented player, probably the most talented quarterback they've had there in a very long time. I don't know exactly when I want to pinpoint right there, but at the end of the day, going to be really fun to watch that. Let's turn the page though. Let's get into week one. There's a number of things to talk about, but I have a couple of questions that I wanted to get into before we get into the breakdowns we'll do on Wednesday. We'll break down every single big game, obviously starting with Ohio State, Texas, and that's actually where our first question comes from. How big of a deal is it Ohio State changing both coordinators? We don't really know how big of a deal this is, and frankly, it hasn't been talked about very much. Now, obviously, with Ohio State or Texas people, they're going to talk about it more often because they're more invested in this game. But Matt Patricia takes over on the defensive side of the ball as Jim Knowles moved on to Penn State. Obviously, it's Brian Hartline at the offensive coordinator position finally for that team as Chip Kelly moved on to the NFL. So this is going to be really interesting. And Matt Patricia, very, very smart football coach, has been a head coach at the NFL level, was a DC under Bill Belichick for a very, very long time. So he's not going to be surprised by anything. That being said, the college game is a little bit different. It's a little bit more all over the place. Now, Sark's offense does have NFL ties, looks a lot like different NFL offenses out there, but it's still a very, very spread concept, very weird, and a lot of different moving parts. It's going to be an interesting thing to watch. There's no doubt about that. Is a guy that understands football as well as anyone in the building, but absolutely someone that's still kind of getting comfortable in the college game, at least this time around, will be really interesting to watch what he can do. And we don't really know how much Brian Hartline's in charge of. Obviously, he's the offensive coordinator, and obviously Ryan Day trusts him implicitly, but we don't know if he's going to be doing the play calling, if Ryan Day is going to be doing the play calling through Brian Hartline, if they're going to be doing it together. Regardless, it is a change from a year ago, and I think Chip Kelly had more fingerprints on that offense than previous offensive coordinators did, and obviously Ryan Day was the play caller back then, so we'll see what happens with this. It's a very interesting storyline that I feel like hasn't been talked about on a national scale enough because, frankly, they're too busy talking about Julian Sayin and Arch Manning, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a really interesting thing to watch, and maybe is the reason that Ohio State starts a little bit slow this weekend. Does Gus Malzahn have a little bit of magic left for Alabama? Is the question I have next. If you didn't know, he is the offensive coordinator at Florida State. I know that sounds very weird, but getting caught up on the season, there is a lot of weird stuff that happened this offseason. But he's got Tommy Castellanos coming in right there. It's a very talented kid, very athletic kid that absolutely can make some plays with his legs. There's no doubt about that. And frankly, if he can get running and he can get into open space, make a couple of guys miss, maybe Florida State gets up by 10, maybe even 14 in this game, and Ty Simpson is playing from behind, that's when mistakes happen. And there's definitely an opening here for that to happen. Obviously, Mike Norvell will have his fingerprints all over this offense as well, but Gus Malzahn has a guy that is kind of the prototype of the quarterback that does really well in his offense. Can he unlock it in week one is the big time question. We'll talk about them here in a second, but a lot of different things riding on this game for Florida State, and frankly, I think Gus Malzahn's at the very center if they're going to be able to beat Alabama. Can LSU finally start fast is the ultimate question going into Saturday night against Clemson. They have to win. It sounds really crazy. Obviously, they don't have to. If they don't win, they can absolutely run the table, get into the SEC championship, win the national championship at the end of the day. It doesn't take anything off the table for LSU. What it does do is make some fans and players look at Brian Kelly maybe just a little bit differently. I know some fans already don't necessarily love the guy, but at the end of the day, it is a very, very tenuous situation at LSU. I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to play good football on Saturday, and I think they're going to feel confident regardless win or loss. But the reality is, if they go down to 0-1 again for, I believe, the fourth year in a row since Brian Kelly has showed up, they're officially staring down Florida, at Ole Miss, South Carolina, Texas A&M, at Bama, and at Oklahoma, needing to win pretty much all but one. Now, they could get there with 9-3 possibly, but you don't want to leave that up to the committee. So at the end of the day, they would have their backs up against the wall. There's no doubt about that. And they obviously could find their way out of it, and I think Brian Kelly's going to be more than fine. I also do know there's a situation down there where they lose by 20 this upcoming weekend, and everyone wants him fired immediately. It gets to the team, and they kind of spiral the rest of the way. I don't think that'll happen. I think they're going to be fine, and I'll decide who I'm going to pick. Frankly, I haven't decided on that game yet, but at the end of the day, they kind of got to get off to a good start, at least if they want this thing to have positive energy going forward and do something really special this year, what they absolutely have the ability to do. Probably need to win this weekend. Is Miami ready to ruin Notre Dame's fun? This is a very interesting thing because it feels like this game is being talked about as a foregone conclusion for a lot of people. Notre Dame is winning it, and that's the way it is. Miami seems to have heard all of that, and they're playing really, really well in fall camp. It sounds like Carson Beck looks the part right now. I still have some worries about that wide receiver group, but at the end of the day, this is a team that's very, very hungry. They came off a year where they just missed. Obviously, a lot of new faces in that locker room, but Mario Cristobal feels that still, I can almost promise you, and they're in a position where they can go in, get a massive win in week one, and I don't think they've lost to Notre Dame in quite some time, and then they're firmly in the CFP conversation, maybe even the national championship conversation, depending on how Carson Beck plays in that game. But the reality is, if they get after CJ Carr, if they rattle him in this game and they win it over Notre Dame, who's just coming off a trip to the national title, regardless of the changes at quarterback for Notre Dame and all of that noise, this Miami team is going to have a lot of juice going forward, and it's going to be a really, really hard team to stop. So really love this game. I think it's going to be a really fun one. I've been leaning Notre Dame for quite some time, and I'm starting to rethink it. And I'll get my official pick on Wednesday, but this one's going to be really, really interesting and holds a lot of power in the Miami world. Where will the upset come from this weekend? I can almost promise you will get one this weekend. I just don't know from where. The big one, or one of the ones I'm watching, is on Thursday night. Boise State against South Florida. They're at South Florida in this game. Byron Brown and South Florida, very interesting team. And you went into last year thinking maybe they were going to be the group of 5 team that found their way out, got to the CFP, and they kind of fell on their face just a little bit. But Alex Golesh, a very good head coach. Byron Brown, a very athletic guy that had some injuries last year but is back to fully healthy. And Boise State with a lot of change. There's no doubt about that. I think it's going to be a really good team. I love Sire Gaines. Think he's going to be a nightmare in the backfield for them this year. But the reality is, it's going to be an interesting game. And you go all the way down to Florida, all the way up from Idaho, this one might get interesting. And it definitely would flip the CFP race on its head in the group of 5, would open the door for a lot of teams, especially for South Florida going forward. Then you got Mississippi State at Southern Miss. For Bulldog fans, I really hope this doesn't happen. This is going to be a very tough one after losing to Toledo a year ago. But why are you going down to Hattiesburg to play this game? You're at Southern Miss for this game. You're basically going to face Marshall from 2024. Obviously, the Charles Huff situation was a little bit interesting at Marshall towards the end of last year, but he has made his way to Southern Miss. He has a quarterback in Braylon Braxton that is special. He's a unique athlete that can do a lot of damage to a defense. This one could get close. I kind of hope it doesn't happen for Mississippi State fans because that would be a tough thing to happen 2 years in a row, but don't love them going down to Hattiesburg to play a team that has a lot of talent, especially at the quarterback position. And then Virginia Tech, quote-unquote, at South Carolina. They're playing in Atlanta for some unknown reason. But at the end of the day, was the world just a year too early on Virginia Tech? Can Kyron Drones and this team put it together a year after everyone thought they were going to put it together? Because if they can, and they can find a way to beat South Carolina, can you imagine the change in tone around South Carolina and Virginia Tech going forward, around the ACC and the SEC going forward? It would be really fun to watch. There's no doubt about that. I think South Carolina's probably going to win. I'm still kind of thinking it over, but at the end of the day, that's a team that can make things interesting in a hurry, and if they start fast, then maybe South Carolina gets a little bit nervous offensively and makes a couple of mistakes. And then who's under the most pressure going into this weekend? It's Arch Manning. From a player perspective, at the very least, it is Arch Manning. It's very clear to me. There are plenty of players that have a huge, huge weekends ahead of them. No one's going to be talked about more, good or bad, as this kid. There's no doubt about that. He is going to be talked about as much as just about any player in the country the entire season, regardless of what Texas' record is. So strap in is what I'm trying to say. But he heads into Ohio State for his 3rd career start, the first start he's made away from home. He's got to be ready to roll. There's no doubt about that. He doesn't have to be perfect by any means, but the weight of the world's going to be on his shoulders, and if he doesn't come out and roll right away, you can bet ESPN's going to change a lot of the narratives. They've been talking about him, and they're going to say he's a massive bust and doesn't belong in high-level football. It's going to be a huge thing one way or the other. He decides which way that goes, and that's quite a bit of pressure on his shoulders. From the team perspective, I think it's Florida State. It's so weird because I don't think they have to win this game by any means. I don't think anyone is picking them to win this game by any means. the reality is, if you get absolutely rolled in this game, if you lose by 30, if you lose by 40, you're in a position where this thing could get really sour fast. It could look a lot like those videos from the late ends of last week, or last year, excuse me, for Florida State, where no one was running with Mike Norvell in the practice facility, and this team could crumble again. Now, I don't think that'll happen. I think they'll play good enough football to keep the confidence up and at least move forward and hopefully make a bowl game. But if they miss a bowl game again, it could start with an absolute blowout loss to Alabama and every player in that locker room looking up and saying, maybe we aren't that good. And we felt really good coming into this game. And then from the coaching perspective, I think it's Hugh Freeze. It's a little bit under talked about heading into this weekend. Auburn fans think that they're going to dominate Baylor. That's kind of the elephant in the room when you're talking about this Auburn-Baylor game. Auburn fans think it's over. They think they've won this game for at least what I've seen on Twitter. Don't get too mad at me, Tiger fans. But at the end of the day, this thing could get toxic in a hurry if Hugh Freeze goes in there and loses that game. They brought in so much talent through the portal. They have so much expectation going into this season, and a lot of Auburn fans do not respect Baylor in any way. You better win this game. I can almost promise you, if you don't, it's going to get really, really messy around Auburn in a hurry. So a lot of different things going into this week, a lot of different questions that I could have gotten into there, but at the end of the day, that's where I wanted to stop it. A number of things coming up this week. On Wednesday, we're going to pick all of the games. We're going to get into Ohio State, Texas, LSU, Clemson, Bama, Florida State, all of the great games coming up this weekend. Syracuse, Tennessee, one we didn't talk about here. Going to be a really, really fun one on Saturday, I believe. But at the end of the day, we will get into all that on Wednesday. We'll get into a couple of different things, have some hot takes for the year. Probably we'll get into them on Friday, but at the end of the day, we have a lot of stuff coming up for this weekend because we got football back. We officially have college football back in our lives. It is a beautiful thing every time that it happens, but absolutely love it. And I think we're going to have the best week one that we have ever had in college football history. And we'll unpack it all on Wednesday. So thank you so much for tuning in. Please do like, subscribe, comment, do all of that stuff. It means the world to me. It really does help out what I do here. And at the end of the day, I'll see you guys Wednesday to pick a ridiculous week one slate.